What if I told you that becoming a millionaire in the future has less to do with luck and more to do with how you think today? Most people believe millionaires are born rich, get lucky in crypto, or inherit money. But future millionaires think very differently from the average person, long before they ever make their first million. In this video, you'll learn how future millionaires think about money, how they see the economy, and wealth shifts, why the old money rules no longer work, and how you can start thinking like them today. That system worked in the past. But future millionaires understand something important. Future millionaires think like this. Future millionaires also understand that time is the most valuable currency they have, far more valuable than money itself, because money can be earned again, but time can never be recovered, which is why they are extremely intentional about how they spend their hours each day, choosing activities that compound results over time instead of activities that only provide short-term comfort or distraction. And this is where discipline quietly separates those who build wealth from those who only dream about it, because while most people trade time for entertainment after work, future millionaires trade time for learning, building, and positioning themselves for better opportunities. And this does not mean they never rest or enjoy life, but it means they are conscious of balance and purpose, understanding that every habit either moves them closer to financial freedom or further away from it. And another key difference is how they think about problems. Because where most people see problems as stress and obstacles, future millionaires see problems as signals and opportunities, since every problem that affects many people is a potential business, service, or solution waiting to be improved. And instead of complaining about rising prices, competition, or economic uncertainty, they ask smarter questions like, how can I adapt? What skills are becoming more valuable? And where is demand increasing? And this problem-solving mindset allows them to stay relevant even when industries change, jobs disappear, or markets slow down, because they are flexible thinkers rather than rigid planners. And flexibility is a major advantage in a world where technology and global trends evolve rapidly. And speaking of technology, future millionaires don't blindly chase trends, but they do pay attention to innovation, understanding that technology is a tool that can amplify effort, reduce costs, and expand reach, whether it's automation, digital platforms, or online education. They focus on how these tools can help them work smarter rather than harder, and they don't wait to be experts before starting, because they believe clarity comes from action, not endless planning. So they start small, learn fast, adjust quickly, and keep moving forward. And one of the most underrated traits they develop is patience, because wealth is rarely built overnight in a sustainable way. And while social media often highlights sudden success stories, future millionaires know that behind most success is years of quiet effort, consistent improvement, and learning from mistakes, which is why they don't compare their Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 10. And this long-term perspective protects them from frustration and burnout, allowing them to stay focused on progress rather than perfection. And another important aspect of how they think is how they view debt, because they don't see all debt as bad or all debt as good. Instead, they distinguish between consumer debt that drains cash flow and productive debt that helps acquire assets or skills. And they are cautious, informed, and strategic when it comes to borrowing, always understanding the cost, the risk, and the expected return. And equally important is how they manage lifestyle inflation, because as income increases, many people increase spending at the same pace, staying financially stuck despite earning more. But future millionaires are careful not to let expenses grow faster than assets, choosing freedom over appearances and privacy over validation. And this mindset allows them to accumulate capital quietly, while others remain trapped in cycles of earning and spending. And they also understand the power of networks and relationships, not in a manipulative way, but in a value-driven way, because they know that opportunities often come through people rather than resumes. So they focus on building genuine connections, learning from those ahead of them, and surrounding themselves with growth-oriented individuals, knowing that environment shapes behavior and behavior shapes results. And when it comes to failure, future millionaires do not take it personally. They don't define themselves by mistakes, but instead treat failure as feedback, a data point that helps them improve their next decision. And this emotional resilience allows them to try again when others quit, because quitting is usually emotional, not logical, and they train themselves to respond rather than react. And this calm, rational approach becomes especially powerful during economic uncertainty, when fear drives poor decisions, because while others panic, sell, stop investing, or freeze completely, future millionaires stay informed, objective, and patient, understanding that economic cycles are natural and temporary, and that downturns often create the best long-term opportunities for those who are prepared. And preparation is something they take seriously, because they plan for uncertainty instead of assuming stability, building emergency funds, diversifying income streams, and avoiding overexposure to any single risk. And this preparation gives them confidence rather than fear when challenges arise. And another subtle but powerful way future millionaires think differently is how they talk to themselves, because internal dialogue shapes external behavior. And instead of saying, I can't afford this, they ask, how can I afford this responsibly, shifting their focus from limitation to possibility. And instead of saying, I'm not good with money, they say, I'm learning how money works, allowing room for growth. And this growth-oriented language influences their actions over time. And they also understand that wealth is not just about accumulation, but about control over time, choices, and direction, which is why they don't chase money at the cost of health, ethics, or long-term stability, because they know that true success is sustainable, not fragile, and they respect money without worshiping it, using it as a tool rather than letting it define their self-worth. And as they progress, they become more selective about opportunities, understanding that not every opportunity is worth pursuing, and that focus is more powerful than constant motion. So they learn to say no to distractions that don't align with their long-term goals, protecting their energy and attention. And this clarity allows them to move faster in the right direction rather than being busy in the wrong one. And over time, all of these small mental shifts compound, just like interest, quietly but powerfully, creating a mindset that attracts opportunities, recognizes value, and makes better decisions consistently. And this is why future millionaires don't look radically different at the beginning. They often live ordinary lives while building extraordinary foundations. And the difference is not visible until years later, when the results finally catch up to the thinking that started it all. They also understand that information alone does not create wealth, action does, which is why they are careful not to confuse learning with progress. Because while many people endlessly watch videos, read books, and consume content without applying anything, future millionaires focus on implementation, even if it is imperfect, because they know that real understanding comes from doing, making mistakes, and adjusting, and they set clear priorities so their energy is not scattered across too many goals at once, choosing one or two main financial objectives and aligning daily actions with them. And this focus gives their efforts direction and momentum. And another important way they think differently is how they view competition, because instead of fearing it, they study it, learning from what others are doing well and identifying gaps where they can offer something better, simpler, or more efficient. And they don't waste time trying to copy success exactly, understanding that imitation rarely leads to long-term advantage, so they focus on building their own strengths and unique perspective. And this individuality helps them stand out in crowded markets. And when it comes to income growth, future millionaires prioritize leverage, which means earning more not by working longer hours, but by increasing the value of their time through skills, tools, and systems. Whether that is through technology, delegation, automation, or scalable platforms, they constantly ask how 1 hour of effort can produce results beyond just 1 hour of pay. And this mindset naturally leads them to opportunities where growth is exponential rather than linear. And they are also realistic about sacrifice, knowing that building wealth often requires saying no to certain comforts in the short term, but they frame sacrifice not as loss, but as investment, understanding that every disciplined choice today is buying them options tomorrow. And this perspective makes discipline easier to maintain over time. And they also pay attention to cash flow, not just net worth, because they know that wealth on paper means little without liquidity and stability, so they manage expenses carefully, keep buffers, and avoid living at the edge of their means, and this creates resilience, which is especially important in unpredictable economic environments. And another subtle but powerful difference is how future millionaires approach advice, because they are selective about who they listen to, understanding that not all opinions are equal, and that taking financial advice from people who have not achieved the results you want can lead to poor decisions. So they seek guidance from credible sources, verified experience, and data rather than emotion or hype, and they remain open-minded while still thinking critically, not accepting claims blindly but evaluating risks, incentives, and long-term outcomes. And this balanced skepticism protects them from scams, unrealistic promises, and impulsive choices. And when setbacks happen, which they always do, future millionaires don't see them as proof that they are failing, but as part of the process, understanding that every meaningful journey includes uncertainty and temporary discomfort. And instead of quitting when progress feels slow, they review, refine, and recommit, knowing that consistency often matters more than intensity, and they build routines that support financial growth, such as regular investing, budgeting reviews, skill practice, and goal tracking, because routines remove reliance on motivation, which is unreliable, and replace it with structure, which is sustainable. And they also understand that wealth is built in stages, and each stage requires a different focus, starting with stability, then growth, then optimization, and finally preservation. And they don't rush through these stages or skip steps, because doing so increases risk and instability. And as they move forward, they become increasingly aware of opportunity cost, understanding that every yes is also a no to something else. So they choose carefully how they allocate time, money, and attention. And this awareness sharpens decision-making. And another important aspect of how future millionaires think is their relationship with uncertainty, because instead of needing perfect clarity before acting, they learn to move forward with incomplete information, trusting their ability to adapt as new data becomes available. And this willingness to act under uncertainty allows them to capture opportunities early, while others wait too long and miss them entirely. And they also recognize the importance of reputation and trust, knowing that in the long run, credibility compounds just like money. So they act ethically, keep commitments, and think about long-term relationships rather than short-term gains, understanding that trust opens doors that money alone cannot. And they think globally rather than locally, recognizing that the modern economy is interconnected, and that opportunities are not limited by geography in the same way they once were. So they consider global trends, remote work, digital markets, and cross-border opportunities, which expands their potential far beyond traditional limits, and at the same time they stay grounded, understanding that flashy success is often unstable, and that quiet, steady progress usually leads to more durable outcomes, and they don't feel the need to constantly display success, because their confidence comes from direction rather than validation. And they also understand that health is a financial asset, because without physical and mental well-being, wealth loses its value, so they take care of their energy, manage stress, and avoid burnout, knowing that sustainable performance requires balance. And this holistic approach allows them to think clearly, make better decisions, and maintain momentum over the long term. And over time, these ways of thinking become habits, and these habits shape identity. And that identity influences choices automatically, making wealth building feel natural rather than forced. And this is why future millionaires often say that the hardest part was not making money, but changing how they thought about money, time, risk, and value, because once the mindset shifted, the actions followed, and once the actions became consistent, the results became inevitable, even if they took longer than expected to fully appear. They also become very intentional about measuring progress, not just in terms of money earned, but in skills gained, habits formed, and decisions improved, because they understand that financial growth is often invisible before it becomes obvious, and tracking small wins helps maintain clarity and motivation during periods when results are slow, and instead of relying on hope, they rely on data, reviewing what works and what doesn't, then adjusting accordingly, and this feedback loop allows them to improve steadily over time. And another important way future millionaires think differently is how they handle comfort, because comfort can quietly become a trap if it prevents growth. So while they appreciate stability, they don't allow comfort to stop them from learning new things, taking calculated risks, or stepping into unfamiliar territory, and they regularly challenge themselves to grow beyond their current level, knowing that growth often feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding, and they also understand that identity plays a huge role in behavior, so they start seeing themselves as builders, investors, learners, and problem solvers even before external success arrives, and this self-image influences how they act daily, shaping choices that align with long-term wealth creation rather than short-term relief. And they are careful about how they use social comparison, because while many people compare themselves to feel superior or inferior, future millionaires use comparison as information, studying what is possible rather than judging their own worth. And they avoid envy by focusing on their own path, understanding that different starting points, resources, and timelines require different strategies. And this self-awareness prevents distraction and discouragement. And when it comes to spending, they prioritize usefulness over status, choosing tools, education, and experiences that improve capability rather than items that only provide temporary excitement. And they are aware that marketing is designed to trigger emotional spending. So they pause before major financial decisions, creating space between impulse and action. And this pause alone saves them from countless costly mistakes over time. And they also think carefully about leverage beyond money, including leverage through media, networks, and knowledge, understanding that sharing ideas, building an audience, or documenting a journey can open unexpected doors, and they don't wait until they feel ready or perfect to contribute, because they understand that value is created through participation, not perfection, and this willingness to show up early helps them grow alongside emerging opportunities. And another subtle mindset shift is how future millionaires approach responsibility. Because instead of blaming external factors like the economy, employers, or background for their situation, they take ownership of outcomes they can influence, knowing that control begins where excuses end, and while they acknowledge that circumstances are not always fair, they focus energy on actions within their control, which empowers them to make progress regardless of external conditions, and this internal locus of control strengthens resilience and confidence over time, and they are patient with people but demanding of their own standards, holding themselves accountable for consistency, integrity, and effort, because they know that discipline applied privately eventually produces results publicly, and they also understand that money amplifies character. So they work on becoming responsible, thoughtful, and grounded individuals before wealth arrives, knowing that unmanaged wealth can create as many problems as it solves. And as they gain experience, they become better at distinguishing signal from noise, learning to ignore sensational headlines, short-term market fluctuations, and fear-driven narratives, and instead focusing on long-term fundamentals like productivity, innovation, and human needs. And this clarity helps them stay calm while others overact, and they don't feel pressure to have strong opinions on everything, choosing instead to remain curious and adaptable. Because flexibility of thought is a major advantage in uncertain environments, and they are willing to change their mind when new evidence appears, understanding that stubbornness is not strength when it comes to financial decision-making. And another key difference is how future millionaires view consistency, because they understand that small actions repeated daily often outperform large actions taken occasionally. So they focus on routines they can sustain, such as regular saving, continuous learning, and gradual improvement, rather than dramatic efforts that quickly fade. And they respect the power of compounding not just in money, but in habits, reputation, and knowledge. And they also understand that saying yes to everything leads to diluted focus. So they become selective, choosing fewer priorities and committing deeply to them. And this depth creates mastery over time, which increases value and opportunity. And when they encounter success, they don't become complacent, understanding that markets evolve and advantages can disappear if not maintained. So they continue learning and adapting even when things are going well, and they resist the temptation to overextend during good times, keeping risk in check and maintaining humility. And when things slow down, they don't panic or abandon long-term plans, knowing that periods of slowdown are normal and often necessary for recalibration. And they use these moments to strengthen foundations, refine strategies, and prepare for the next phase of growth. And they also understand the importance of clarity, taking time to define what wealth actually means to them personally, rather than blindly following society's definition. Because without clarity, it's easy to chase money in ways that don't lead to fulfillment, and this personal definition helps them make decisions that align with their values, reducing regret and confusion later on. And they understand that wealth is not a finish line, but a tool that supports a meaningful life. And this perspective keeps them grounded and focused, and over time, their thinking becomes less reactive and more intentional, less emotional and more strategic, and less focused on quick wins and more focused on durable progress. And this gradual evolution in thinking is what quietly transforms ordinary actions into extraordinary results, not overnight, not magically, but predictably through consistent alignment between mindset, behavior, and long-term vision, even when the journey feels slow, uncertain, or invisible from the outside. At the end of the day, the biggest difference between those who struggle financially and those who build lasting wealth is not intelligence, luck, or background, but mindset and behavior repeated over time, because future millionaires are created through thousands of small, disciplined decisions that most people never see, choices to learn instead of distract, to build instead of consume, to think long-term instead of chasing shortcuts, and to stay calm, patient, and consistent even when results are slow, uncertain, or uncomfortable. And this way of thinking allows them to adapt as the world changes, protect themselves during uncertainty, and position for opportunity when others hesitate, proving that wealth is not something you find, inherit, or wait for, but something you intentionally grow by becoming more valuable, more aware, and more responsible with each passing year. And if there is one powerful message to take from this, it is that your financial future is not decided by the economy, technology, or circumstances alone, but by how you think, learn, and act starting today. Because when you change your mindset, your habits follow, and when your habits change, your results eventually must change too. So the real question is not whether the future will create new millionaires, but whether you will start thinking like one before that future arrives.